here we are today to talk about, I guess, one of the most enduring and famous and amazing drug law reform festivals in the world.
Protests.
Sorry,
Protestival, maybe.
Of course, protestival.
Otherwise we're paying for the police. Seriously, festivals.
Yeah, exactly. We have to make sure our definitions are right, and I guess protestival is really the name of the game because so much of the MardiGrass program is all about, indeed, protesting these insane drug laws. And I know that, prohibition has been around in various forms now for like 100 years or more. So I think, it's now getting to the point where people are being agitators. It's generational now. Families for many generations have had to deal with this. I know that the flavour of the times is people sort of screaming about freedom when it comes to lockdowns and, pandemics and whatever. But I can't help but reflect that definitely people protesting against drug laws and prohibition has been going on for a long time. So I'd like to think that MardiGrass is really part of the original freedom fighters. And in fact, if we probably had managed to change consciousness in regards to changing the laws, that maybe things wouldn't have been as bad during the pandemic. It's almost like the pointy edge of community activism. And so, MardiGrass and Nimbin has been part of that. So I was going to say a great way to sort of, I guess, get going with talking about the history of MardiGrass is not just the last 30 years, but we probably need to go back to the early 70s and to the Aquarius Festival, and even prior to that, because cannabis, of course, has been a thing in this area even before the Aquarius Festival, right? Mullumbimby.
Certainly integral part of the whole hippie movement.
Yeah, there was a hippie movement here, not in Nimbin so much, but in
Killer.
Damn phone.
New World Order's caught up to me.
Yeah, if everyone could turn their phones off.
Dream about a river 5 feet long, mighty immense but not too strong. You'll be high but not for long. If you's a viper, I'm the king of everything. I gotta be high before I can swing.
So the prehistory of MardiGrass is the history of the Northern Rivers, and I guess people arriving and starting to build alternative communities, and it almost seems like prohibition has been a way for which people can be harassed.
Absolutely.
And that definitely has been something that's been going on for a long time before MardiGrass.
And I think that's what probably galvanised the beginning of MardiGrass, wasn't it, Bob? Big year of helicopter raids, everyone just sick of it, feeling picked on like we were.
Decade of helicopter raids.
Yeah, and it was, just a step too far, and I think Bob in particular had been drumming up the idea for a while, and let's go. May the 1st is traditional protest day, May Day.
Yep, the Day of the Workers. So, for instance, I think Bob started the Nelly Normal Nimbin in the late 80s. So there was growing resistance to basically the way prohibition was treating the local community.
I think too, you put it in a historical context, talking about like the Northern Rivers in the early 70s, but also just the anti-Vietnam War era in the late 60s, early 70s. There was quite a few examples of extreme civil disobedience, where basically people that have been arrested by the cops, be they draft dodgers or drug users at the Aquarius Festival, the paddy wagons are surrounded by freaks, and the cops let them go. So that happened in early 70s, I think in Sydney Uni, with in a few places with draft dodgers getting busted by the feds or the cops, and all the students just gathering around the paddy wagon and getting them out. Get some bolt cutters, away they go. Same thing happened at the Aquarius Festival with someone that got busted for drugs. A whole bunch, they let him go. Eventually he handed himself in later on, but it was a really stone cold obvious realisation that actually you don't have to do that civil disobedience and the overall tradition of activism had a place to play within the drug war, because as you said, it was always used as a way to fuck with the hippies.
And the hippies grew out of drug use. Really, it was LSD, weed.
If you look at the history of it, absolutely.
Yeah, it created.
Absolutely.
We all had these, for me, like spiritual experiences, a whole new reality.
Yeah.
And really, Nimbin is part of that birth. The Northern Rivers, people coming up here in the late 60s,
early 70s, and then with the Aquarius Festival in 73, Nimbin, like it or not, has become like one of the last living survivors.
And then we became an easy target. I mean, I wasn't living here then, but visiting, and it was infamous. Easy target, stood out like a sore thumb.
Shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah, it was. And easy pickings, training ground for cops and helicopters.
Nice little holiday.
Yeah. And that's that Byron Bay. It was famous, paid for, great holiday. And the helicopter, my experience of helicopters over your house is fucking scary. Kids are screaming. It totally is like those Vietnam War movies we've all just seen. Animals go ballistic.
Yeah. The natural reaction of any mammal on the planet to a helicopter hovering overhead is to run around in little circles and shit yourself, basically.
Yeah.
It's a nightmarish, deep-rooted fear of fight or flight reaction. Something to do with the subs, I suspect, in the helicopter blades. Sub-song.
And it's National Party country. They don't give a shit. They fully support. So we were laughing stock, really. So
the police were mounting these raids on Nimbin, and people were getting very, very upset about this. And so we decided to hold a rally, just a gathering of the local community who would speak with one voice, who would speak in unison, who would have a state of not being fearful. It was an empowerment ritual. This was a rally to support drug law reform.
It was going to be a protest rally walking up the street from the Bush Theatre down there at the bottom of the hill in Cullen Street, down there at the other side of the bridge, getting together in the car park. And then with a huge array of instruments of all sorts and shapes put together by Donato and I think Tonya as well. And all these people with trumpets and cymbals and pots and pans marched all the way up to the police station, chanting, free the weed, let it grow, legalise it, and all the other things you chant when you're chanting to legalise cannabis.
We had musicians, brass instruments. There was the donkey with the sign on its back that said "The law is an ass." Michael Balderstone had made the first of the big joints, which was carried along.
To actually have that initial protest, do that march. It's great, and a bit of a feeling of, hey, we can stand up for ourselves, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
With the early protests.
Empowerment, people power, like understanding that when bunches of people come together, you can usually, affect some kind of a change, even if it's, for instance, making sure someone who's being arrested is being freed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, on that.
It's empowering.
Yeah.
It's empowering, and it's also reassuring. You think you're out, you're a weird pot smoker. Suddenly you meet 1,000 others who aren't mad at all, thinking like you think. It's reassuring and confidence building for people.
Yeah.
That first MardiGrass, I remember, we had such a good time. It's like we're doing this every year. So that's how it started.
Yeah, it becomes very inspiring as well to keep it going. Yeah, it's, I guess for many people in Australia, they might be shocked to know that for many decades, there's like this paramilitary response to drug use in a certain part of the country. Like, you know, to have helicopters hovering over your home. This is Australia, everybody. This is Australia, everybody. What, since the 80s? When did they start with...
Well, since the 70s, really.
Yeah,
if
since
you want
the
to look
70s,
at
for many decades.
Historic 1976, massive raid on Tunnable Falls, massive raid on Cedar Bay. Tunnable Falls, they didn't use choppers, they used cattle trucks, loaded everybody up, took them back to Lismore. Ran around the block a few times with everybody in the back of the cattle truck to sort of show all the locals what they captured.
Yeah.
And
My
in North
God,
Queensland,
it's like
they're
the
coming
witch
on
trials.
naval boats with helicopters and fucking just full-bore paramilitary operation, burnt their houses down, cut down all the fruit trees everybody had grown, burnt a whole lot of people's possessions, found a handful of seedlings.
Gross.
Literally.
Yeah,
Did you
so
see the 420 last week in Melbourne? And like 30 to 50 police just smashed people. One guy waited for one guy to light up a joint. He was a legal medical rubbish. You're not allowed to smoke outside.
No.
Just smashed him down, carried away. Like 30 to 50 cops, full on battle gear.
Yeah.
That's last week in Melbourne.
yeah, it's like...
That's
yeah.
the nature of the state. I mean, it's always been like that. I mean, there's been a lot of verbal complaints about police state and fucking blah 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 in the last couple of years with the pandemic, but the reality is, for a certain class of the population, for a certain level of the population, and it's racially based and it's culturally based and it's financially based, you get fucked over.
Yeah, you do.
You're not a free citizen. You don't have any rights. They just come in and they kick the door in and they grab you and they take you off. If you're black, they'll probably shoot you.
Yeah. It's the drug war
Tell me
is so
something
much a
different,
class war.
It always has been.
Yeah,
It's-
it always has been.
and
The
it's
jails
also
are
a lot
full.
of the people
race
that have been
war.
howling about freedom in the last few months have never actually experienced that. They've never actually had the jackboot of authority on the back of their neck just because they look different or they are different or whatever the fuck. And that's a reality that, well, some of us have had that our whole lives.
I like that Nimbin cruised through the pandemic because we're so used to being bullied and oppressed, and it was no big deal.
No big
mate.
deal. Well, it's great. It's great. I mean, fill the security cameras with a mask on easily.
Yeah.
Change your walk slightly.
Yeah, totally. Couldn't
Yeah,
make
well,
it right, mate.
absolutely.
Police weren't coming near you. You might be infected.
But absolutely, it was true. Like the fact of having to wear masks was great because suddenly you were anonymous if you were protesting, right?
Precisely.
So for instance, even if I had been against wearing masks, I would have worn a mask at the protest. It's a smart thing to do. And I guess if we want to talk about repression, Indigenous peoples have been totally overrepresented when it comes to using the drug war to really, destroy their lives.
One of the numbers in jail, Aboriginal people 30 times more than white people. It's just disgusting.
And most of that would be to do with drug...
drug related. It's all drug related, And, the violence that's now happening in the cities, big gangs, it's all drug related. People forget illegal drugs is the biggest turnover on the planet money-wise, along with armaments, and they're all mixed up. But, it's incredible. This election at the moment, no one wants to talk about it. None of the big parties want to talk about it because they're all scared they'll be seen as soft on drugs. So, incredible to me how reefer madness has worked so well.
Particularly in Australia, because I know that we're talking about MardiGrass and Nimbin.
Mate. Go mad.
But we're, I guess now 30 years down the track, we're in an international environment where reefer madness is sort of drifting off into the, the void. And yet Australia is still, 420, let's have 30 cops arrest one person with a joint. I don't know, it's...
Well, we have no Bill of Rights, and it's ironic to me that America started the whole drug war, and ironic.
Yeah, the ones that are winding
that a few
it back.
states there now have got weed out, and suddenly after 20 years, what are they saying? Colorado, domestic violence, suicides, and deaths from car accidents are all down about 30%. And that's... What more evidence do you need? But morons here, you can't even get it on the agenda.
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing a political thing, just to try to get heard a bit. Which is all that MardiGrass has been about, hasn't it? Trying to get heard, trying to educate people.
Its roots were very, very clearly grown out of traditional political protest.
Yeah.
Well, not political, socio-political protests, rallies, marches, the May Day.
Yeah.
The whole principle is that the numbers of the people are strong.
Yeah.
And it was all about protest, and I think we've done really well to maintain that focus, just given the very nature of cannabis.
And also, who wants to march and say, yeah, I'm a criminal? So a couple of times we tried to have gatherings in Sydney and nobody turns up. All the cops are there filming everyone.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can do this in Nimbin. You're expected to smoke pot in Nimbin.
Yeah.
So anywhere else, it's very hard to create some resistance. Yeah, I'm a criminal every day, So,
Once again, there's no culture of resistance.
No.
Whereas there is within the greater arc of fucking alternative history and anti-war history or
And,
environmental protest
environmental
history.
protest,
Big goals struck locally with the nightcap and with a whole range of forests and with the whole environmental agenda in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And onwards.
It's absolutely pioneering as far as protests go, and getting heard and making a difference.
Yeah, and it's like that's actually a tradition within the culture of civil disobedience, or NVDA they call it these days, non-violent direct action. It's just.
And then somehow to turn it into fun.
Yeah,
which, the old. When injustice becomes or resistance becomes duty, I think you struck that out and put fun,
It's
which
like,
is a good plan.
If we're talking cultural baggage, hey, we're fucking hippies, and it's all about.
Enjoy.
Is it fun?
Yeah.
If it's not fun, let's not do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the theatre of protest, the circus, it's definitely a great way to get people involved as well.
And you want them to enjoy it. They're going to come if they have a good
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the one thing I've noticed over the years with MardiGrass, with the, I guess the focus of MardiGrass for the weekend is the protest rally and parade and
Sunday.
march. Usually on the Sunday. And the Aboriginal people usually lead that.
They always lead it now. There's a smoking ceremony at the beginning, local Gilbert, local Aboriginals, and they lead the march, and they're just victims everywhere. They are the ones copping it worst on the drug war. Anyway, MardiGrass, talking about MardiGrass, it is about education. I mean, we're trying to change people. You're trying to get them to rethink the bullshit they've been taught. And I think, in time, Nimbin and MardiGrass has done lots on that,
Yeah, I noticed because there's been, in the last few years, people have refound old footage and digitised old videos. So it's been wonderful to see some of the footage from the early days. Including the first gathering where indeed there was talks in the town hall.
Yeah.
And I love that because as we know, that has been an enduring part of MardiGrass is indeed, speakers from all around the world, all around Australia, local, just people that have got an immense amount of knowledge through so many different subjects and backgrounds on cannabis. It is an amazing culture. And I noticed too, back in the 90s, so, MardiGrass was this fledgling, protest. But
the Americans got onto it.
Yeah,
the Americans got onto it. Ed Rosenthal came out here, changed the way we all grew weed.
Dennis Perron, these major people that were part of activism in America noticed very quickly. So well done.
Jack Herrer, he was great.
And this is prior to the internet being a really big thing. So I was impressed by how switched on they were to get here. Yep. And then of course since then we've had doctors like Dr. Behrman come from overseas. We've had famous glassblowers come and speak. It's been like a bit of a parade of all sorts of amazing people.
It's changed because
the
talks now can be much more open, and it's lots of doctors, like half a dozen doctors talking at the MardiGrass program this year, and a lot of them are already prescribing and giving out weed, and so, it's changed, but it's just even more disgusting for me. Because we argued forever, this is great medicine. No, it's not. It took epileptic children to get them to acknowledge, it's okay medicine. Now you can get it through a doctor, imported from Canada, all grown indoors, and we're not allowed to grow our own, and we're not allowed to drive. So it's actually got worse.
No,
for
look,
me.
the corporatisation of the whole, I mean, legalisation, who would have thunk it? Decriminalisation was probably a better model, just to remove the penalties and not try to set up a fucking systematised way of dealing it and taxing it. Just, I don't know, leave it alone. Because it is a herb.
Yeah.
And sadly what's happening with legal cannabis and indeed with the medicalisation of psychedelics in recent years is that the corporates have just come down like a ton of bricks.
Money's
and they
the
own it
ruling
now.
factor.
And it's not like anyone that's actually grown pot in the past is going to get much of a look in. You know?
No, except
to the industry, the nascent industry that's
you have a
flourishing.
criminal record, man.
Yeah, see you later.
I love that in a couple of states in America they prioritised
people
who've been busted, gave them the licences first. That's what should happen.
That's sort of how it should be.
Yeah, you can imagine in a better world, Indigenous people would be the first to get these licences and the other start businesses.
Yeah.
And
great idea.
Yeah, but I know poor old Australia, we're even way behind. When you say in the US, I noticed one of the African countries that had introduced medical cannabis are doing a similar thing of, people that have suffered from drug war.
Yeah.
Yeah, as
Mind you, our health minister said we're going to supply the world. We're going to be the biggest supplier.
I remember that. We're always the biggest.
They can all just see money in it. Yeah. And I reckon most people wake up in the morning and they just think, how do we make money? Yep. They're just playing Monopoly. So everyone just looks so much money in weed. So it's all... I just think our health... And drug use is just totally a health issue for me. Just people trying to have a good day, trying to feel good, have less pain.
Yeah.
It's got to be somehow in the not-for-profit realm. Otherwise, people are blinded. The dollars blind people. I don't know how to do that.
Look, probably the most critical thing that could be achieved that would see that through to fruition somehow would be just the legal right to grow a dozen plants.
Yes.
Right? To be able to go, okay, I've got the legal right to grow this many plants in my backyard for myself for medical reasons, It's a herb. Because it's a fucking herb. You can grow it in your backyard, you can grow enough probably to keep yourself stoned most of the time. Yeah. And maybe,
It's an absolute fact. Aussies in their big backyards, even the balcony on your unit, even under a light in your lounge room, everyone can grow their own medicine. And it could be a CBD plant or a THC plant. You don't have to get stoned. You don't have to heat it. This is too much for people to think there's a plant like this that not going to cost you anything. This medicine, that's an incredible thing. If we can make that happen, it'd be awesome.
But there's such a disconnect with law enforcement. Medical cannabis has been legal in Australia since February 2016, and yet last week at 4:20 in Melbourne, 30 cops have to arrest a medical cannabis patient.
You're allowed to smoke outside.
Yeah, but it's like such an over-the-top reaction to someone doing such a pathetic crime.
Nothing's really changed.
Yeah, it's like the police don't seem to want to back down, do they?
Well, their jobs are at stake. Half their work is directly drug involved.
Is going
half
to
their work.
festivals.
And not only will they lose their work, they lose their power. Yes. And I reckon that's huge. You can pull over a car and you got a Nimbin number plate, you can just search your car. Yeah. We're in the hot zone, they have a right to do what's it called? Suspicion, whatever. Yeah. Reasonable suspicion.
Reasonable cause.
Yeah, and so just being part of this community is apparently reasonable suspicion.
Yeah, well it is.
Yeah.
We used to sell quite a lot of weed t-shirts, like you're wearing maybe. No one buys them much anymore. You don't want to be a target. No one, the policing's got more and more fascist, more and more heavy. The pandemic helped. Well, and people, you don't want to wear it.
Generational change too.
Yeah.
It's just different world.
So, back to MardiGrass speakers, that people that have come, we've had lots of doctors and professors and so on, but also we've had a lot of politicians over the years. Yeah. So, especially Greens, John Kay, I think, was one of the earliest Greens who came. Yeah. So, and of course David Shoebridge,
always big on
Kate Fairman, and Fiona Patton of the Sex and Now Reason Party, a really long time supporter. Yeah, so it's kind of like, even despite all the different efforts we've made and even support within the political realm, the overwhelming desire to not change in politics is really over the top. Like it's almost like, how do you get them to start? I fear sometimes, by the way, that cannabis, even though it's an important issue for a lot of people in this area, due indeed to how you treat it, for a lot of people it's not a big issue.
No.
In fact, it's a dangerous issue, you know. I always remember the...
dangerous politically.
Yeah, the member for Coffs Harbour standing up in Parliament, they were discussing decriminalising marijuana, and he'd go, hang on a minute, do you want everywhere to look like Nimbin?
Yeah.
Legalise cannabis?
Yeah.
It was the end of the discussion.
Yeah, look, I mean, there is a huge, you know, third of the population that really have never encountered cannabis, don't get all the things that we take for granted for whatever, however long. The ironic part, though, is that they all know somebody who does use cannabis, and they usually like them.
And it's medicinally, the secret's getting out too.
Yeah.
A lot of people have got a grandmother now, or
Yeah.
someone who's crook, or
Yeah.
cancer, or
Yeah,
helps
yeah.
them sleep. Or
Yeah. Look, it's a really benign herb for old people.
Yeah, it
and
is.
for sick people too. It takes care of all the many of the symptoms and side effects of both cancer and the therapies that are available to cure it. You know, like it really does help with all of that.
Great sleeping medicine.
Fantastic sleep, and just as you get older, your body fucking hurts. So many baby boomers that were never even interested in cannabis, or that tried it briefly in the 60s or 70s, have suddenly embraced it wholeheartedly because it actually makes them feel like getting up.
And we've learned a lot of stuff. You know, if you don't get stoned if you don't heat it, cook it or light a joint, and you don't have to smoke it. You can take tinctures, you can eat it, you can... It's and suddenly CBD, suddenly the hemp is a useful anti-anxiety, whatever, something too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you know, the prohibitionists always scream about, all the children will start using, you know, cannabis. But I think we've probably noticed since, you know, medical cannabis became legal, that the big uptake has been in the oldies of the community. As in, you watch out, people in their 60s, 70s, whatever, are all busy using cannabis.
Getting high and cruising around on their mobility scooter.
It is absurd, isn't it?
One of the biggest things interesting for me about MardiGrass has been the big change in the last, is it 5 or 6 years, since there's 3 roads into Nimbin, the police blocked them all and saliva test everyone. And it just killed it. It did just about killed it. So now it's the hardcore people are coming. You've got to come in the middle of the night or a few days early, or find a driver.
You know, you've got to be really dedicated to wanting to come to MardiGrass, because ultimately it used to be come there and get stoned and have a good time for the weekend, which attracts a large percentage of the population.
Yeah, it did.
But now it's like, well, you probably can come here and do the protest and hang around for the weekend. You might not get stoned.
It's true. It's one of the hardest weekends to score in
get
Nimbin.
busted. You'll get breath tested on the way in. I mean, the whole breath test thing is just, or swabbing is I mean, that's one of the big stumbling blocks.
Serious bullying.
Well, it's just in terms of like the stuff's legal for medical purposes. There's a whole lot of people that use it, including CBD, which has no psychoactive effect theoretically. And yet you can get busted for driving on it, or for driving on it from yesterday or the day before. And yet, if you've got a script for fucking morphine or an opiate, which will put you to sleep,
No worries.
that's all right.
You can drive that for pharmaceuticals.
We need to sort that one out in order to actually even have if you look at the history of the American, God help us, the American movement, the medical thing was a critical way that they managed to get a wedge, which then eventually grew into legal cannabis overall, for better or worse. But at the same time, we've got the medical cannabis, it's all there, it's all blah blah, corporations are trying to do it, but there's this stumbling block.
No other country, it's like our driving
Britain,
laws.
which is using the swabs, has a measurement of how much active THC, that was probably yesterday, fuck off. You know?
Now they basically, it's anything over 10 nanograms, 10 parts per billion THC, you automatically lose your licence in New South Wales for 3 months. So, basically you could have had a joint a few days ago. So it's total bullying for me and bullshit. And we can't get anyone to take it seriously. So the irony of it also, MardiGrass was nearly too big for Nimbin. There was nowhere to park. If it's wet, it was a nightmare. So I can see the positive that we've got. It's become hardcore MardiGrass. The talks are serious. If you want to come, you'll get here, like you say. A few people have discovered the tunnel. It's pretty well hidden. No, you can come in under the tunnel. Yeah, no, you don't talk about that. But it will survive, because the drug, the war on weed is as bad as ever because of what things you're saying. So we'll just maintain it. It's a bit easier that it's not massive and we've got logistical nightmares of people parking up.
There's a sweet spot in crowd numbers with any big event.
In a tiny village.
And MardiGrass had surpassed that years ago, and it's actually moved back to a really manageable, nice vibe, man.
And that's something we haven't really touched upon a lot, but MardiGrass itself is unique in as much as a whole little village town of Nimbin is really MardiGrass for the weekend. That doesn't happen very often.
No, and I love that, a lot of towns have a festival. Grafton has its jacaranda. I love that we've got a useful festival, protest about a plant,
It was that sense of excitement, a joy of, there was a palpable air of excitement that people had broken out of their fear and were stating for the first time together a community's desire to see drug law reform within Nimbin.
And we're here talking about the incredible MardiGrass Protestival. And we got up to the point of chatting about really some of the, exceptionally interesting events that are part of MardiGrass, which really came from greater and greater numbers of people coming to Nimbin and really looking at ways to, entertain as well as educate.
And include them too, I reckon. So the great thing about the Hemp Olympics is, show that image out there, stoners turn into vegetables under a banana tree, whereas we can be as active as anyone and
we
as
can
sharp as anyone. Yeah, we can do it. And the pot poetry is still a goer. Pot art sort of dribbles along, doesn't it? The Combi Convoys become a great event where Combis start off in Byron, go to Lismore and turn up here at 4:20 on Saturday. That's an event. Things evolve and some events have come and gone a bit, but you've got to have an entertaining program.
Absolutely. Well, the one nice thing about MardiGrass is it is a bit DIY. Like there's definitely a certain structure is created, but often, what actually happens is a consequence of who comes and what they decide to do. So it's really lovely to have that kind of palette. And I was just thinking with the Hemp Olympics in particular are brilliant because people from all around the world can easily get involved. So, anything from everyone, all pot smokers around the world, it's important they know how to throw a bong.
Very important.
Exactly.
If the cops are coming, you got to get the bong straight through the window.
That's right. So it's distance as well as accuracy. And the iron grower person, or the grower, is it the grower iron person?
It's an extremely difficult event, which I think about the stupidity of prohibition. It's a plant you could grow in our backyard, and here we are, got to climb hills, crawl through lantana tunnels, get covered in leeches and ticks.
Carrying water, buckets of water, So
we build this lantana tunnel for the weekend and put leeches and ticks in it. It's all pretty real. You got to carry water to the plants, then go and get the plants and come back, and it's an ordeal, and you have to sign a waiver so you don't have a heart attack. But anyway, it's hot. It's really made by having these two good comedians commentating the whole thing and rah.
Yeah.
But the Combi Convoy is a great event. I'm talking about long-standing events. The thing that we lost was the tug of drug war with the police on the big hemp rope, and
that's
the cops would train for it, and we'd start MardiGrass off on the Saturday with this huge tug of war, and then we couldn't beat them. And then things evolved. We learned to tie the rope onto a post in the tent, and they couldn't see the end of it, so they couldn't possibly win one year. They got pissed off. And then we did it on a hill, and they got slippery boots, so that was a failure.
Don't give away the secret.
No, well, they won't do it anymore. We gave them a hard time one year.
We won fair and square twice.
I know. Anyway, but that was a great event. They take it all too seriously, the coppers.
Yeah, I've noticed. The police can be very thin-skinned. Yeah. They're not out there when it comes to a good sense of humour. which is really what MardiGrass is all about. Like, I guess people that have suffered under prohibition for such a long time, it's good to at least have a laugh.
And they're all different. There's some good cops and shitty cops.
And look, on an individual level, lots of them do have a sense of humour, but in their official capacity when they're working, they're not allowed to show
Not in front of the
commander. Not allowed to
commander.
display it. They're not allowed to do anything that's going to make the uniform look bad. In the minds of some fucking uptight commissioner or commissioner's assistant undersecretary dog fucker. I don't know, you know.
And the next year they brought the riot squad.
Yeah.
And it was
ridiculous. It was great the first few years because there really wasn't a police presence.
That's right.
And then, there was political shift, really.
Yeah, it was.
You know?
But by the Sunday with the riot squad, I remember that first year, they came not knowing what to expect. And,
They came totally amped for a riot.
By Sunday, in the rally, they were just about marching with us. It was a joke. Easiest job they'd ever had. Riot of colour, nothing else.
Right,
you can see it, the dawning realisation up throughout the weekend as they go.
Yeah.
At first they're really antsy and patting their guns and standing there in muscular sort of positions, and then gradually they start loosening up and people talk to them. Some of the girls talk to them.
Yeah, stone girls in little mini dresses coming up to them,
and they go,
taking their photos with them.
Problem. These people aren't actually trying to bash each other up or bash up. They just want to get stuff done.
Yeah, the power of peace and love and harmony.
All of that
and
shit.
weed. And I mean, that is the education that, hey, it's a pretty harmless herb. And it was educational for the cops, I think.
Well, because
seeing a heap of people stoned, behaving okay, having a good time,
that's right,
having fun.
They're usually in environments that are alcohol.
Yeah,
so
fueled,
every event you go to is full of alcohol, and I think we've all realise and understand that to be at an event where alcohol is not the preeminent thing, it is a totally different vibe.
Totally different vibe.
That's why dance parties over the years have been revolutionary as well, because back in the day, many of them had zero alcohol as well. So it's a different space for women, children, men that aren't into all the macho shit, which makes me think of like a big part of MardiGrass for many years was the dance for drug law reform.
Back in the third MardiGrass, fourth MardiGrass, this is the early 90s or mid-90s, right? So there's a whole, if you like, sort of division or a bit of a schism happening within the culture between the older freaks and the younger freaks. And a lot of it was, funnily enough, music-based. And so a lot of the younger crew were into dance culture, basically, like what we call in this area doof music, which is essentially an outdoor rave party. That had become an intrinsic part of the life of most of the second generation hippies, our children. And they were going, well, look, MardiGrass is great, but we don't really like Neil Young all that much, or Bob Dylan, or Bob Marley even. We like doof. So can we have some doof? Can we do a doof? And there wasn't a real lot of happy response from the older freaks, just like their parents who liked Frank Sinatra but hated the Rolling Stones. They didn't like doof. That's not music. You can't dance to that. You can't even understand what they're saying. That's because they're not saying anything. They're going, Anyway, so they just said fuck it. And a few of the younger kids, the son of Bob Hopkins, who was one of the intrinsic characters, and my son Ron, said, well, let's just do a doof. We'll do a renegade doof on the outskirts of town. And they organised a dance party that went on the Saturday night. And drain the town, which was a good thing at midnight because you've got hospitals, you've got old people, you've got a town. Do you want a bunch of stoned, inebriated partygoers, ragers, still hanging around town at midnight? No, it's better if they actually leave town and go to a nice contained area where they can just sort of burn it out all night and dance to a repetitive beat. That's great. And it's like I personally like the culture. I kind of bunch of young people taking psychedelics, dancing to music. Sounds terribly familiar, Good light shows. Anyway, so they did that the first year. Once again, they got about 1,000 people there. They were smart enough to then take any profit they made, because they charged it at the gate, and give it to the local hospital. And the following year, once again, it doubled, and they did this for quite a few years. And each year they covered costs, and then they'd take the money and divide it up between, the bushfire brigade, the hospital, local childcare centres, the wildlife carers, a whole range of worthy community-based projects. And so those guys were actually getting a slice of the financial pie that potentially MardiGrass is for them. You know, a lot of people coming, they're going to have to spend their money. So let's see some of that money go back to the community. And that was really a massive effort by these young guys, more as a rebellion against not being able to have a dance party than anything else. But they were wise enough to go, well, we don't really want the money. Let's give it. Let's make the town want this to happen. And sure enough, by the 5th or 6th year, the local community was really behind it. So that's a little known fact about MardiGrass, with MardiGrass and Dwarf.
Another part of MardiGrass that's happened for many years that sort of was really the end of the Combi Convoy was the 420 on Saturday.
Yeah.
Big bongs, stoner blaze.
Yeah, that's an event.
Yeah, so that's...
How many joints we could all light at once.
That's
right. We had the world record for a couple of weeks or something.
And that, I guess, part of the fun of MardiGrass, and to keep, the police guessing, a lot of those joints are, Damiana joints?
We had to live that down. It was pretty shameful. I mean, there were so many cops, and we thought, we've still got to throw joints to everyone. So we rolled lots in Damiana or Mugwort, didn't we? It was like pretty shameful.
Well, people fire them up and get very disappointed.
Yeah, it was shocking. It doesn't happen anymore. I thought we were clever. There's a lot of good stoned ideas pop up at MardiGrass. They're not always that awesome.
They don't always pan out.
No, they don't. Yeah.
That's, by the way, to me, that's an interesting part of MardiGrass, because it's like an unspoken thing that it's like the tunnel. I know that on this panel we're giving out a lot of secret information.
The tunnel we shouldn't have talked about, but it's okay. Just get it out there.
Yeah, okay.
And other events like the seed swap, and there's lots of things that the Cannabis Cup at MardiGrass was legendary at MardiGrass. And in different locations and secret, and you could buy tickets in a raffle to go to it because everyone wanted to go. And it finished up with the police smashing into the wrong house in Nimbin in the middle of the night, where we'd managed to fool them. It was in that. So now the Cannabis Cup happens on a separate weekend. But that was a great early part of MardiGrass, as I remember the Bush Theatre year.
Well, the year that certain parties entered a DMT, so
I do remember
the Cannabis Cup. That was pretty interesting.
Yes.
Did they win?
They would have, but they were disqualified.
They would have.
It was a very popular, nice.
Yeah, well, that's really sort of combining different plant allies there, isn't it? Making sure that you're ramping it up. Very nice, very nice.
It's interesting for me that mushrooms have crept into MardiGrass, which I'm totally happy about, and it's so local anyway as well. And I noticed the talks last year were packed out on suicide, but now it's become mainstream, interesting nowadays. So, I mean, it is just about weed, and I've got to be careful because the legalised cannabis party, not everyone sees
psychedelics as part of that.
Psychedelics as part of it, but for me, the whole drug war is just shocking, mate. This is a health issue.
Yeah, it's all drugs, isn't it?
It's all drugs.
It's worth saying that the first couple of MardiGrass events were in fact drug law reform rather than cannabis law reform, and that was something that changed after a few years.
Yeah, okay.
Because of the same reason. There's people within the cannabis community who don't want to be tarred with the heroin brush, even though heroin's a far bigger social, or was back in the day, a far bigger social problem.
I can argue
the only way to deal with it is legalise it and let's work it out, but there's still a whole lot of people that go, no, that's smack, we don't like smack, it's cannabis we're worried about, which is fair enough, but it's a little bit...
It's bullshit. It's they're just not understanding.
It's the whole package that's the problem. It's the prohibition, the concept of prohibition that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Thou shalt not. Fuck you.
Yeah, totally.
And there's all sorts of, other than just the emotive anti-authoritarian response, there's all sorts of really sensible, logical, practical reasons why they should just do away with that headspace.
It is so simple for me. Laws. The best pain-relieving plants in the creation are all made illegal so they can control pain relief. Pain relief is the game. Make people feel good. They give you the shirt off their back, and it's all twisted and, it'll dribble to an end. Hopefully it dribbles soon. How many people have died because of the drug war weed? No one's died from the plant.
No.
People dying in jail. Yeah, no, it's a serious war, and I can see why politicians don't want to talk about it, because it is a war. They don't really want to say, we're at war with our own people, basically.
Yeah, it's not about the plants really.
No.
Yeah,
It's nothing
there's other
personal.
bigger, the
It's money,
origins of prohibition as well, the racism of it all in
And
the US.
as long as there's interests like Sky Media or Murdoch or various.
What would you do to get Murdoch a decent cookie, eh? Anyway, it's...
I was hoping Jerry Hall would get into OD on Viagra.
You think something.
So, Michael, you're part of a campaign at the moment, the newish...
Hemp Party now changed its name to Legalise Cannabis.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got people running in the Senate across Australia, and I think we're just trying to get it on the agenda, and send a message to the government. You can vote one for legalised cannabis, then vote for whoever you like, because it's noticeable cannabis users are from all walks of life, and it's people who've discovered it's a terrific medicine. It took me a long time to realise Nimbin has heaps of alcoholics who don't drink, and epileptics who don't have seizures, and people with PTSD who aren't furious all day. I mean, it's an outdoor hospital, smoking weed. A lot of Nimbin, ironically. And the fact that we're still criminals and, anyone can go to a doctor and get it legal, it's too stupid for me now. And it's tragic that we can't get... The police should be backing us, but their jobs are at stake, and Big Pharma is the major lobbyist in Canberra. I remember reading in America, in Washington, there's 2 permanent Big Pharma lobbyists in Washington for every senator. It'll be similar in Canberra.
Yeah, wow.
This is the big money, we can't get weed legal, they'll lose a fortune.
The gases and the miners will probably give them a run for their money.
Yeah, well, they're even
still
investing in weed now, aren't they?
Yeah, of course. No, it's the corporate takeovers.
Yeah, it is. It's the corporatisation of weed, the pharmaceuticalisation of cannabis. Really.
Yeah, well, there's big cannabis.
Yeah, big cannabis.
Right.
Some of the most highly paid CEOs in Canada apparently in the last year were cannabis CEOs.
Yeah.
So it's totally up there now with big business.
Yeah.
Talk about cops losing their jobs. Like, once again, that's not totally true. Because we've now had legal cannabis in quite a few places around the world, like say Colorado now 10 years. There's still police forces
ready for them to do.
Because I think what happens with, and I've noticed this with California as well, the shift, like they've still got plenty heads to bust because, there's certain rules then to do with legal cannabis. So you can basically go and arrest the people that aren't abiding by those legal cannabis rules. So, no, it's just, in some ways it is just shifting it towards more social justice. That the police, for instance, can't just go and grab someone because they lit up a joint. It's because we're still in Australia dealing with such over-the-top reactions to really petty activities.
It's the culture wars.
Yes.
And remember Bob's early thing, bad laws breed disrespect, and there's total disrespect out there for the cops now. Been whole generations, and they got to have to claw that back, and it'll take a long time.
Yeah.
It's just,
Well, it's the absurdity of it's only due to your interest in cannabis that you're a criminal. Yeah. So the rest of your life is totally whatever, caught up in the
decent
whole,
people.
Yeah. So that the absurdity of that is unfortunate.
And the social, the consequences, which this is the plant we could grow in our backyard.
And MardiGrass actually does have an opening as well that is really the Hemp Olympic torch arriving to commemorate all the victims of the drug war.
Yeah, a minute's silence for the victims of the drug war. And lately the Lismore mayor has been opening MardiGrass. I don't know how we'll go with the new guy this year. I better invite him, that'll be interesting. See if he's up to it.
Yeah, because often the mayor has been supportive, definitely in recent years, of MardiGrass.
Definitely in the last few years.
And ironically, of course, in this area, it's one of the major tourist
dollars.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's interesting that even with that fact, there's still opposition to it, you know, from the powers that be. Because usually money is what is the tipping point to make something acceptable.
That's what happened in Nimbin, wasn't it? There was a lot of resistance from some locals early to MardiGrass, and then the shops did so well.
Yeah, there's been big changes internationally with cannabis laws.
Yeah.
You know, with Canada.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's legal for those who enjoy it. What do
What's
they call
wrong
it?
with us in Australia?
Adult use.
What's wrong with us?
Yeah. So how do you see Australia's laws evolving? I must admit I feel a bit negative. David Halpin, the magistrate, did a talk at MardiGrass last year saying that Australia will be the last place on earth to change its laws. Yeah.
Why?
Because we're essentially we've grown out of being a convict colony, and essentially most of our legislation, a lot of our whole setup, certainly our constitutional setup, is still sort of based on that.
No Bill of Rights.
No real anything.
Yeah.
Beyond,
we were the last to get done. Settled really.
Yeah.
So by then they'd worked it out, give them no chance.
There's
no
really,
real people here.
Yeah.
Terra nullius.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they just set it up as a convict colony and then gave us federation at a certain point in time. But
Let's
didn't
talk
really
about
give
that.
much. And well, I don't know that.
That's a
much
good
about
road.
it,
I reckon
really,
that's
but,
a good
But
road.
they didn't really. It's set up as, and certainly historically and sociologically and just purely culturally, it's always been, you know, convict colony, and the cops have always been in this kind of jail keeper situation with a large segment of the poorer population, and certainly Indigenous population, and come the 70s and 80s in this region, the alternative population.
And New South Wales, the oldest police force on earth.
Yeah,
They say, from the Rum Rebellion.
Rum Rebellion onwards, you know, and it's a really flawed model to be trying to expect legal change within. And over and above that, you have got this weird mixture of things that grew out of the 60s, 70s change, you know, the culture wars, that there's definitely a third of the population that thinks that all of the cultural changes that grew out of the 60s were good things. And then there's still a third of the population that thinks they're fucking terrible things, and the world's gone crazy ever since about 1967.
Yeah.
Or, you know, 70s, and this
threatening.
women's lib, gay rights, fucking Aboriginal rights, environment, all that's just crazy talk.
And it's threatens
There's
all their old structures.
There's a lot of them, and that's still a major cultural thrust that elements of the fucking National Party and the Libs and the Labor, all of them, are still pushing from that point of view. And,
I actually think weed is helping.
Weed helps, but
now.
it's still just part of that. That it's not a separate. It's not really even medical in their head. They're still probably hard. That wedge of the population, or wedge of the police, or wedge of government, still probably think that the medical cannabis thing is a whole blag, so those hippies can smoke pot.
Yeah, so what I've seen changing is the number of people who now are totally straight, desperate, last resort. They tried weed. It was a miracle for them.
Yeah.
They get their best night's sleep in months.
Yeah.
Lots of that I'm discovering in Nimbin. People who finally, you know, they have a go because it's been made legal. We'll try it.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is good
Some
shit,
people get angry. I've been suffering 40 years. I wish I'd known about that.
Well,
that's
you
not
know,
uncommon.
Don't follow.
So we're going to hang in. So I like what you're saying. That I always think Australia was the last place settled. You know, the blackfellas weren't real people. We'll give you no rights.
Yeah.
So we're going to be hanging in on MardiGrass for another 30 years, maybe. But anyway, we're hanging in.
Could be a while. You know, it's.
Because one of the catch cries is, you know, every first weekend in May until the drug laws change.
Yeah.
And definitely they have changed, but
not good enough.
It's still the status quo here.
Totally.
Like, for instance, the riot squad still comes, and the helicopter raids still happen. We're talking about contemporary times.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
So the reaction.
The jail figures and arrest rates have not changed in Australia.
Yeah.
There's many or more people in jail, more arrests. Bullshit. No attitude change, really.
So yeah,
And MardiGrass is intrinsic, you know, is part of the hemp embassy, really, isn't it? They both kind of started together. The embassy backs it, really. I see the embassy and MardiGrass very much though as a community thing. Like Nimbin owns it, really. I always feel like that about MardiGrass. Lots of people come out of nowhere to do jobs. I hardly see them all year. they'll turn up, they'll play their role Heidi with Jungle Patrol, for example, which is, you know, doing our own
And not
security.
to mention the Gunja fairies.
Gunja fairies, who, you know, they'll be there again. So, you know, over 30 years it's evolved as our community kind of annual celebration, was a harvest celebration, and all these people just are part of it, and they quietly smoke pot. If they don't smoke pot, they've all got friends who smoke pot around here, so they get it, and they get, you know, how important it is. Most people are not seeing how big prohibition is. It's huge.
I think, you know, once again, if you're living in the mainstream part of suburban, urban life,
Doesn't touch you.
It doesn't really touch you.
They
Even
think it doesn't
if you are a
touch you.
bong head, you know, even if you have got a room in your suburban house where you pull bongs and, you know.
They think it doesn't
Unless you're
touch them, they
unlucky
don't
enough to
leave
run
their
into
door
cops.
unlocked at night. Though.
Your kids might get affected if their kid gets busted because the youth pothead crowd are targeted in the same way that hippies or Aboriginals have always been targeted.
And pot's the easy bust, bulky, smelly. It's actually encouraged ice use in Australia.
Yeah.
And interesting, they do, you know how they test everyone's wastewater? So the latest tests in Canberra showed a sharp increase in cannabis use and drop in ice use. And I reckon that's legalising weed. And we've seen it in America. If they let us grow our own weed and stop picking on weed, there'd be a lot less trouble with other drugs. So fortunately, a lot of cops realise it's better not to focus on weed. If you hammer weed in Nimbin, everyone's in the pub or using something else.
I think any cop with any experience, unless they've got a particularly major personal bias, will have figured out a long time ago that the people on pot aren't really a problem in their policing job.
No.
You know, they're just like, they're you know.
They're easy bus to get promotions.
Easy bus to get the numbers up or whatever, and there might be a certain disparagement in their attitude towards potheads, but it's not like there's any kind of, you know, watch out for him, he's a fucking psycho. Yeah, right. You might eat all your bucket.
And there's a fair bit of resentment towards the stoner who kind of wanders around doing what he likes all day, perceived as that.
Yeah.
And, you know, whereas we go to work hard all day and pay your taxes and so on.
Oh, there's all of that.
Yeah. That's the culture war.
It's the culture war, and it's you know, Murdoch again too, in the sense that a lot of those kind of attitudes are really brought. That's how it's represented.
Yeah, and it's a disconnect from reality because you know, pot use is widespread.
Yeah.
And it's used a lot by people that do have a job and a family and a mortgage and blah blah blah. As in, you know, it's kind of pretending that it's some fringe.
Yeah.
And I guess part of the rollout of legal cannabis in North America and other places is like, you know, there were big publicity drives to normal, as in the people that use it are normal.
You see it in the media.
Yeah.
It's
as in just it's just the girl that works at the bank or the bloke that runs the you know, the car wash down the road, or it's not something that's just the world of a bunch of
outlaws do.
That's right, outlaws.
Bohemian weirdo musos or whatever.
It's moved a lot. It's moved way beyond that. And probably always has, by the way, because as we know, part of the culture wars is stereotypes and the other, the thing that you have to be frightened of and avoid at all costs. So this year, MardiGrass, for the first time in 30 years, is not happening on May because we've had a few natural disasters in this area. So for
September.
everyone that wants to come and join us this year, it's in September from 16 to 18.
And the harvest is very soggy, so it will be a planting ceremony.
That's right. Let it grow, free the
16,
weed.
17, 18.
And really, you know, MardiGrass is really about, you know, continuing to protest these absurd laws, because they are absurd.
Yeah, we just keep waving that flag, you know, someone will eventually notice it.
Okay.
It is absolutely a protest. It's good to remember that. And I think, you know, we have made it fun. We have made it enjoyable.
It's such an international gathering, or it's grown over the years. Like, you know, there's people from all around the world come, and as shown by, you know, people come and volunteer to help. And they're from all around the planet.
Yeah, the volunteers are a big part of MardiGrass we haven't talked about. Usually there's 50 odd camped out the back of the Hemp Embassy, and they're mostly international backpackers. Yeah.
And that's the other big part of the parade has been the joint, the big joint, which was originally a canvas bamboo stuff.
Like it was sheets sewn together.
That's right.
Painted.
And smoke.
They loved the smoke machine in there with the bee smoker trying to keep it going in the rain. Oh my God, they were the good days.
And then, of course, you sort of upgraded to an inflatable joint.
Well, the problem was we'd go to protests and it'd take like 3 hours to build the bamboo joint. You know, it was, by then you've been arrested and hopeless. So the inflatable one was 10 minutes. I like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much for this great rave.
Yeah, pleasure.
Yep, and
pleasure.
yep, and we'll.
And thanks to the EGA. Love your work.
Yeah, thanks guys for the voice. It's a bummer that MardiGrass isn't happening this weekend, but
book it in middle of September.
That's right. Come on
It'll
up.
be good. 30th year.
In fact, some of our EGA comrades do come to MardiGrass.
Yeah.
And help us with some of the drug-free driving.
Yeah.
Like, as mad as it sounds, some of our EGA comrades are drug-free drivers.
Well, it's great they don't test everything, do they? Mushrooms
They
have become
don't test the mushrooms.
very popular, mushrooms, since they brought in saliva testing. I've noticed that. Very popular. I love that hippie resilience. We'll find a way. The vision's there. Nothing's changing. You know, we just want harmony between each other and the planet, really, don't we?
Dreamed about a river 5 feet long, mighty immense but not too strong. You'll be high but not for long if you's a viper. I'm the king of everything. I gotta be high before I can swing. Light a tea and let it be. If you're a viper, when your throat gets dry and you know you're high, everything is dandy. Truck on down to the candy store. Blow your top on.